Dear friends, glory to Ukraine. I welcome you on my lecture about security and international relations of Ukraine. We will touch the important issues about Ukrainian security and the impact of global security, about the Ukrainian relations with European and world countries. And we definitely touch the problem of warfare that we have nowadays with Russia. My name is Dmytro Sherenhovsky. I am a PhD in global politics with the focus on conflict studies. I'm lecturer at the Ukrainian Catholic University. I also am the vice rector for academic affairs and have a background in international relations, security studies, and global politics. So let's come to the lecture. We will discuss the Ukraine and Russia relations after the collapse of Soviet Union and security challenges that were created during this time. I will also touch the question of the new security architecture in European area and also in the global area and what challenges were set for Ukraine. Also, we definitely touch the question of Russian world issue and how this idea impacted actually on the development of Ukrainian strategy and development of Ukrainian behavior on the international arena. We will slightly touch the Russian-Ukrainian war in the context of global security and speak about the challenges to global security and those transformations that are happening right now. So let's get back to 90s and talk about the security challenges in Ukraine. So definitely after the collapse of Soviet Union, many of the former states of Soviet Union, including Ukraine, faced the same difficulties, faced the same challenges. It was a division of the executive power, since the majority of the execution was laid actually in Moscow. So the states that started to be independent actually had to transform their political agenda and prepared to be independent global states. However, many of the ties were linked with Russia. It also was the division of economic production chains, since once more economy was connected. You can imagine when for some of the product, something could be simply delivered in Russia, something in Kazakhstan, and some parts of, for example, of the vehicle could be produced in Ukraine. And later on it was combined together. And here we have the break of these economic production chains then made an important issue toward the economic security. The division of the Black Sea Navy and the status of Crimea was important because once more, being one country, all the military power was also decentralized in different areas. And here we had the need to build our own military, our own forces, and to define the place of Ukrainian territories in this agenda. Nuclear disarmament became one of the most important issues for Ukraine, since Ukraine has, together with Russia, has very big nuclear potential. Actually, we were in the top 3 countries in the world in the number of the nuclear missiles. And the new security architecture that became a new normal, that Ukraine had to decide which kind of the security organizations and which kind of the political organizations we should be part of and what we should do. So everything here after those agreement in the Belovash Accords that happened in 1991 that actually declared the collapse of Soviet Union, the creation of the Ukrainian state, these issues became one of the most important issues for Ukrainian security. According to the data that we have right now, we should take into account once more that Ukrainian energy complex and economic complex was very deeply connected with Russian complex. And we can here see on the chat that actually more than 50% of Ukrainian economy and trade was connected with Russia. And also starting only from 95, 96, this number was decreased. And we see the trend actually that the trade and new production chains with European countries and with other countries started to booming. There was the difficult story in terms of economic security to rebuild these chains, to build production in the territory of Ukraine, to do the complex of this production, but also to start actually trade relations. And what is interesting here that every episode of this independence in these choices was connected with some of the tensions with Russia that actually predefined the story of the full-scale war that we're witnessing right now. What is important here that you can see the trend that actually only after 2013, actually 2014, we see the decline of trade with Russia and rapid increase of trade with European Union that is definitely connected with Russian aggression and occupation of Crimea and some of the territories in Donbas area. And you also see the trend that European Union became one of the important players in terms of Ukrainian trade. However, we also see the other states, and that is an important issue because these other states are among the top are actually the African countries, Turkey and especially China, that became an important players, especially for the Ukrainian export, agriculture export and other exports. And it's also played a story that I'll describe a little bit later. Energy security became one of the important issues because in 90s, 75% of gas and 80% of oil consumption of Ukraine was from Russia. Once more, chains were really dependent on Russia, and it was a typical situation for all the post-Soviet area. So the question of energy security and energy independence became really vital. Before 2014, we actually had near 35 to 55 billion of cubic meters of Ukrainian gas imported from Russia, and it was used for Ukrainian consumption. During the Soviet time, the consumption of gas and oil was even larger, but because after the collapse of Soviet Union, Ukrainian massive building and manufacturers, especially hard manufacturers, that were ruined because of the losing of these chains, economic chains, and reorientation of Ukrainian economy and trade, actually the consumption was going down. However, at the same period of time, we see the gas and oil infrastructure that was built and that was used. So Ukraine became to some extent one of the important players in this field because Ukraine has a tremendous gas transport capacity. So near 150 billion of cubic meters of gas and oil was transported through Ukraine to European Union. And we can see that overall European Union consumption of gas and oil is really huge and was really huge. So in 2020, actually near 50% of oil and gas that is used by European Union was simply imported from Russia. And the major part of it was going through Ukraine. So it created the difficult story both for European Union and for Russia, and that also inspired Russia to find new places since they were really unhappy of the policies of Ukraine that were oriented mostly and especially after 2014 towards west rather than towards east. So gas and oil take into account this situation, take into account the huge and massive consumption by the European countries. It became not only economic issue, not only energy issue, but it became the security issue. And you can see that actually while Ukraine decided not to import gas since 2014 from Russia, but nevertheless almost 40 billion of cubic meters of gas was flowing through Ukraine and is flowing right now. And that creates for Russia idea to build new pipelines, especially we know the Nord Stream, we know the Nord Stream 2 and the South Stream that were trying to to engage European countries into this production and in some way limit the possibility of Ukraine to be a player in this field. Definitely that sharpens Ukrainian policies, that sharpens Ukrainian energetic security and create big tensions with Russia. The next important issues in terms of Ukrainian security was the Black Sea Navy. The case was the same. After the collapse of Soviet Union, we have a great part of Ukrainian Navy that was concentrated mainly in Crimea. So you can see on the map a few bases of Ukrainian Navy that was settled here. However, there were also present so-called Soviet bases that Russia decided to use for their purposes. And for this reason, Ukraine and Russia made an agreement, especially I would quote here the agreement of 2010, when Ukraine allowed the military presence of Russia in Crimea Peninsula. However, the presence was simply limited, and we have several times of discussions and negotiations about what kind of troops, how many troops, Russian troops, should be settled in Crimea. And then became very tricky in that sense. Why? Because after changing of Ukrainian policy towards European and Euro-Atlantic integration, that became really hot issue for Russia. And Russia was trying to make several attempts to increase the number of the troops and the number of the aircrafts and warships that used to be settled in Crimea. And Russia was speculating, including with the gas issues and oil transfer issues, according to have the greater number of their military be present on Crimea. And suddenly it made a trick with this bad decision when Ukraine agreed to prolong once more the presence of Russian troops, because Crimea became one of the first Ukrainian areas and territories that actually was occupied by Russia in 2014. And Russia was using it not just as a touristic zone that Ukraine usually used this area, but it simply transformed Crimea into the big, huge naval base. So we can see here on the charts the rapid increase both in terms of the personnel, so please compare that after annexation of Crimea, they raised the number of Russian troops to 31,000, and according to the agreements of 2010, no more than 25,000 should be present. We see the increase in the aircrafts, we see increase in the warships, so really peninsula, very peaceful peninsula, was transformed into the big Russian naval base. And that's definitely it's challenging not only Ukrainian security, especially in the current warfare, but also overall Black Sea security, given the threats and to other Black Sea countries. One of the important issues was nuclear disarmament. Actually, in 90s, as I told previously, Ukraine has the third largest nuclear stockpile in the world. However, Ukraine agreed, when Ukraine gained an independence, Ukraine agreed to start the process of non-proliferation and to start the process of the disarmament. So in 1992, according to the Lisbon Protocol, Ukraine agreed to remove more than 3,000 of tactical missiles. And that was the idea of negotiations with nuclear countries, especially with United States, with Russia, but also with Britain and France, of the nuclear countries. And later on we have agreement with China that according to that idea, if we start disarmament, they will provide the guarantees to Ukrainian security, that Ukrainian land would not be questioned and Ukrainian sovereignty will not be questioned. And so-called famous Budapest Memorandum was signed in 1994 that simply declared guarantees that Ukraine should have. Unfortunately, that was really tricky because There was not legally binding procedure in this case. And actually what we see right now that in 2014, Russia brutally violated this agreement. And after that, especially in 2022, in February 2022, they started the full-scale aggression and simply violated what was agreed in 1994, and due to which guarantees Ukraine actually started the process of nuclear disarmament, and was considered to be one of the brightest cases in the world how we can do the disarmament and how we can build security without the necessity of using nuclear weapon. It played a trick with Ukraine, but on the other hand, there was important story that, once more, everything was connected during Soviet times, so there were a number of economic reasons why Ukraine need to do this, because we simply have no resources to support like this big potential, nuclear potential, at that period of time. And indeed, take into account Ukrainian presentees in the world affairs as one of the members of the United Nations, it was quite important for Ukraine to show a signal to the world that yes, nuclear disarmament is possible and peace building is possible. However, once more, it played a great trick. At the same period of time, there was a question for Ukraine. So what greater security strategy Ukrainians should have? And Ukraine decided to be integrated into the global schemes and global security communities. So I will touch very slightly our presentees in the United Nations. While Ukraine was one of the founders, and here you can see a photo what actually of the signatures on behalf of Ukrainian Socialistic Republic that in 1945 when Ukraine signed this agreement. What is tricky here, you will not find such signatures by Russia, because Russia was never a member of the United Nations. Soviet Union at all was a member of United Nations, and since Ukraine and Belarus were the territories of the very brutal war during the Second World War, it was a decision that these socialistic republics were also present here. However, it's a tricky situation in that actually Russia misused and tricked the international community by saying that Russia, as a successor of the Soviet Union, have a place both in the United Nations and in the Security Council. However, Ukraine was also a successor, and all the other republics were also successors of the Soviet Union. So this question is really subject to debate right now. However, if we see the Ukrainian presentees within the United Nations, definitely we can state that Ukraine was included and Ukraine was contributing to the world peace and world security. So Ukraine take a part starting from 90s until now in more than 6 UN-led peacekeeping operations, and you can see that more than 300 of Ukrainian soldiers were actually blue helmets in different regions and in different territories. So we were securing and providing peace within the UN agenda, and that was a decision of Ukraine to be included into the global security agenda. At the same period of time, while thinking about the regional security agenda, it was a question for Ukraine. It was a big question for Ukraine rather to join the so-called post-Soviet area of security that was developed mainly by Russia within the former Soviet states. And Ukraine made the decision, no, that we want to build like the different story. We want to have the integration more into the European Union and Euro-Atlantic, so NATO. And that is why you can see here on this chart that from all commonwealths of independent states, there was a platform, Ukraine decided not to join it. And also the so-called the Tashkent Treaty, Security Treaty, that was formed by Russia and Russia-led allies, was not also supported by Ukraine. So the only regional community that is connected with Russia and with post-Soviet area is actually the free trade area that we were enjoying. But we decided not to follow the other steps. On the contrary, Ukraine, in terms of the regional security, decided to make it pass towards NATO. It was not rapid, it was not decision in 90s, but year by year, taking into account all these challenges that we described that happened in 90s, persuades more and more Ukrainian political elites and Ukrainian society that we need to follow this pace. So in 90s, in 1991, Ukraine joined the North Atlantic Cooperation Council and started the process of negotiations with NATO, mainly in the field of peace building. We were not joining any of the NATO troops until the 94, when the Balkan War actually was held, and when Ukraine decided, and Ukrainian troops were also helping and present, so we became a part of the so-called KFOR in former Yugoslavia, NATO-led troops. And that was a period of time when we decided to transform our security system towards the NATO standards. So in 1994, the Partnership for Peace program was launched, and it was a year-by-year plan according to which Ukraine started the intensification of our cooperation and also transforming political and military standards according to the NATO standards. However, at this period of time, it was not a popular idea. Ukraine enjoyed its neutrality, Ukraine officially was a neutral state, and the establishment of the partnership program was mainly done to update Ukrainian army and to update Ukrainian possibility to help other nations. However, closer to the new millennium, and especially after the events that happened both in Balkans and also in Nagorno-Karabakh and later in Chechnya, persuade Ukraine and Ukrainian society that there could be a possible danger from Russia, because Russia started creating a number of areas of insecurity within the Eastern European area. So in 2008, Ukraine decided to change their mind, and we were not applying at that period of time to NATO, but actually we were starting talking officially about the possibility of to gain the NATO candidate status. And exactly at that period of time, we were doing it together with Georgia. And in 2008, it was exactly after the membership aspirations were recognized by NATO countries, Russia started war in Georgia. So Ukraine decided to change its trajectory, and since 2009 we established annual national program. So there were very concrete tasks for Ukraine to transform its military sphere, its armed forces, its defense system, and also political system towards NATO standards. And in 2017, we officially declared in our constitution, later on in the law on the national strategy and national security, aim of membership of NATO. And this happened after 2014, after Russia made its aggression towards Ukrainian Crimea and towards Luhansk and Donetsk and overall part of the Donbas region. So if you can see by this, it's important issue that usually Russia is using a number of provocations, because Ukraine was neutral at this period of time. Yes, we were transforming our army, we were transforming our defense according to the NATO standards. However, they were not very prompt transformations, to be fair. However, while we were neutral, while we have the neutral status, actually Russia attacked us. So the decision to go and integrate Ukraine to NATO was taken only after we see that Russia is attacking Ukraine. And since 2020, Ukraine gained an Enhanced Opportunities Partner. We became Enhanced Opportunities Partner. That also created an option for Ukraine to be more and more engaged into collaboration with NATO countries. And the same story was practically with EU. So Ukraine in the 90s, we didn't decide at first to integrate to EU, while a number of the Eastern European countries of so-called former Soviet bloc decided to do this transformation. However, in 1994 we concluded partnership and cooperation agreement, and trying first of all to differentiate the trade schemes with different countries. However, in 2005 we joined the European Union Ukraine Action Plan that also partly was opening the possibilities of European market to Ukrainian traders and to Ukrainian business. And in 2014, Ukraine tried to be engaged a little bit more, so we tried to sign this association agreement and the agreement of the free trade area. However, in 2013, when it was planned, the former president Yanukovych decided to stop this process. And that is why the so-called first the Euromaidan revolution started, and then the Revolution of Dignity started, because at first there were many aspirations, especially of young Ukrainians, to sign this agreement and to get the perspectives to move freely, to cancel visa regime, but also to trade freely with European Union. So economic security, social security, non-military security is present. However, for Russia, it was a very important trick. And finally, after the President Yanukovych fled from Ukraine and Ukraine held a number of the democratic elections, and especially after the full-scale Russian aggression on Ukrainian territory in February 2022, Ukraine decided finally to apply officially to be a country member of the European Union. While we are doing this video for May 2022, European Commission is actually working on the Ukrainian survey, and possibly this summer Ukrainian could be one of the candidate countries, gain this status, but longer process towards the membership to the European Union will be present. At the same period of time, if we gather all these issues, there was one issue that was very important for Russia, and that was influencing Ukrainian security. This is an issue of the Russian world. What does it mean? There was one of the surveys that was held in Russia at the beginning of the 2018s and 19s, and 63% of the Russians, you can see it in the chart, were believers that the Russian world exists. And according to these surveys, Ukraine was included into Russian world. What does it mean, Russian world? So actually, three main important issues were considered to be a part of it. First of all, it is a common post-Soviet space, the historical ties, then protection of Russian language and Russian-speaking minorities, wherever they are settled are, even in the different countries, and Orthodox religion. And the case is that it was so powerful narrative and the so powerful belief that was shared not only by Russian elites, but also of the Russian citizens, that influenced the Russian official policies and also Ukrainian-Russian relations. However, we can see by many of the charts and surveys that Ukrainian was never part of this world. So this was like Russian narrative, a narrative of Russian propaganda, but sociology will tell you a little bit different story. Because according to national survey that was held in 2001, Ukrainian census, we can see that the largest nationality, according to the census, is Ukrainian. We have Russian minorities and other minorities, but in the major sense, Ukraine is mainly built of the Ukrainian national identity. The same story with the language issues. While indeed many of Ukrainians are bilingual, especially at the central part or eastern part of Ukraine, citizens, according to census, declared that the first language and the mostly shared language identity is Ukrainian language identity, not Russian. So Ukraine is not separated as Russians believes and Russia propaganda tells. And finally, we can see also, well, many of the citizens practice different languages. According to the surveys by the Razumkov Center, predominantly they want to have Ukrainian language as one official language within the Ukrainian state. So language issue was never the language issue indeed. It was one of the issues that was brought by the Russian narrative and Russia propaganda. The same story with the Orthodox religion, where you can see officially Ukraine is one of the biggest Orthodox countries after Russia, and we have the great number of the Orthodox believers. However, if we come closer to data and ask if Ukrainian Orthodox, they believe that Russia has a right and a special role of protecting Orthodox Christians, you can see that Ukraine is, among all the Orthodox countries, the last country when people think Russians has right to do this. So Orthodox is mainly of faith. It's not about the geopolitical decision, while it exists as a geopolitical decision for Russia. However, the idea of this Russian world was so strong and was become a part of Russian official rhetorics and policies that actually it influenced the situation. And it was one of the ideas when actually the Russian-Ukraine war started. So, as we told, Russia created a number of the armed conflicts, the fields and the areas of insecurity in different states. And since 2014, unfortunately, Ukraine became also the land of insecurity. Let us slightly go inside of the Russian-Ukrainian war in 2014 and see what type of war it is and what impact it has on Ukrainian and global security. So usually everything started from plea of former President Yanukovych, and after that the different separatist movements that were inspired by Russians started in the eastern part of Ukraine. And what is tricky, according to number of observers, even OSCE observers, between 15 and up to 80% of all these separatist movements, actually Russian combatants take part of that. So it was not like the classical separatist that we see in the other countries. It was inspired directly by Russians. And we have so-called the Donbas conflict or the Donbas war that was started in 2014. And here on the maps you can see how it was moved. And definitely you should notice that the period of June and July, Ukrainian army has a possibility, even limited possibility, but to ensure step by step control over the Ukrainian territory. However, closer to winter, because of great support of Russian troops, we failed to do this. And here was a period of time when so-called Minsk agreement were concluded that actually declared the possibility of ceasefire and the later on process of negotiations towards this territory. And one of the most important issues within the Minsk process was that the ceasefire should be established. And the zone, the demilitarized zone, should also be present. However, Russia was brutally violated all the time and all the years of this agreement, and finally in 2022 they bring troops, almost more than between 80,000 and 100,000 of troops to the territory of Russia and territory of Belarus. And later on we see that these were not trainings, but actually these were the real troops that invaded in Ukraine in February 2022. What we can see in this warfare, that this warfare is not the classical conventional warfare, but actually this is warfare that is done according to so-called Gerasimov doctrine of 2013, when Gerasimov was and is one of the Russian generals who, in his article, The Value of Science and Prediction, actually declared the not only conventional way of how to run the war, but also the other aspects of war, especially informational war, economic warfare, and other possibilities to raise the protest potential of the population in the other country that should be a part also together with the conventional warfare. And this is typically what Russia was using in Georgia in 2008 and is using right now in Ukraine. So in general, we call it asymmetric warfare. That because according to the Andrew Mark in his article, while big nations lose small games, we see disparity between the power of the big country and the small country. And indeed, we have disparity in the military power between Russia and Ukraine. And asymmetry lies in different domains. So it could be in military, in weapons, in resources, in information, in media, and also the other cases. My colleague Mark Voyager concluded that we have different domains that can work together, and the main idea is to target the nation that you want to target, not only with the military or conventional ways, but also in the long list of other domains. So it's called the hybrid warfare, the famous brand for this war that is happening here in Ukraine. And we can see here that intelligence, cyber warfare, lawfare, there is a war inside of the courts and criminal courts and the other courts and international courts, but also the energy war, economic war, infrastructural and informational war is also present within this Russian-Ukrainian war. Before February 2022, these hybrid warfare possibilities, they created a number of dangers to Ukrainian security and to the regional security, because they established a gray zone with drug trafficking, with human trafficking. They established a number of Ukrainian IDPs who had to flee from eastern part of Ukraine and settled later in different regions or going abroad. It also created a possibility of the numerous cyber attacks that were happening in Ukraine, but also were used not only for Ukraine, but for the warfare, for the cyber warfare with Western countries. Also, the health security issues for Ukrainian citizens, especially those who stayed in the so-called independent republics of Donbass. It also created a number of the lawfare cases, judicial cases that we had to protect in terms of the gas and oil trade, and also in terms of the maritime Baltic Sea security and different number of other hybrid threats. However, with the full-scale warfare from February 2022, we can see that it also created a number of challenges with more officially according to UN, but we don't know the exact number of people, how many people of civilians and military of Ukrainians are killed. We will see it after the war stops. But at least UN declared more than 3,000 civilians killed, including small children, more than 10 million of Ukrainian refugees. Part of them stayed in Ukraine, especially in the western Ukraine. Part of them fled to other countries. Part of them were simply deported to Russian territories against their will. and massive destroyments of Ukrainian cities in the eastern part and the southern part of Ukraine, including more than 250 cultural objects that were destroyed. So how this warfare created challenges to global securities? First of all, we should understand that this war is definitely about Ukrainian security and Ukrainian independence, but it's not only about Ukraine. According to any iteration of the official military doctrine, Russian military doctrine, they considered that the possibility and the task for military to support the new place of Russia within the world order. So they officially declared that these rules that the global community built since the end of the Second World War are not working anymore, at least for Russia. And they have the right to rebuild them. And especially the tremendous part in Russian military doctrine is paid to North Atlantic Treaty Organization, to NATO. So you can see that at least in two iterations of 2010 and 2014 of Russian military doctrine, any development and any strengthening of NATO is considered, without mentioning what is strengthening of NATO, is considered to be threat to Russian national security. That is why we have many propaganda messages in the ongoing war, Russian-Ukrainian war. I mean that they are fighting not with Ukrainians, that they are fighting with Russia. And this is directly that this idea of fighting with NATO that Russia brought as a main narrative, and after they see that Ukraine trying to get as an independent country actually to define their path towards the Euro-Atlantic integration and European integration, it was considered to be a threat for Russia. But also there are a few logics behind of that. So at the global level, Russia is used what is called defensive realism approach. And according to this approach, NATO has used, Russia thinks that that enlargement of NATO that was happening in 90s is actually a threat to Russia. Also, Russia was using offensive realism approach, so taking to it and saying that if NATO can do this enlargement, why Russia can't do it? Why Russia can't strengthen itself by weakening the neighboring country? And by weakening these neighboring countries, it's been simply aggression towards independent states, as what we see in Georgia, at least, and in Ukraine. But also, the superpower logic of the Cold War is present. So we don't live in the Cold War conditions. However, Russians consider it to be a part of the game. And they want to gain this right to define so-called zones of interest. And the movement of troops before the full-scale aggression in February, actually settling these troops on the territories of the bordering lines near Ukraine, and several talks with European countries and with the United States simply showed it that they wanted to define zones of interests, and definitely they were considering, according to this Ruski Mir or Russian world idea, Ukraine to be a part of their zone of interest. And also it is a challenge and the narrative between that, the story that Russia still is trying to find a place between United States and China. So in that way, they are trying to build the third way, not to link towards Western world or towards Eastern world. However, they also have this domestic logic in that. And mainly warfare and war and aggression towards Ukraine was simply used to secure Putin's regime. According to the Levada Center, that is a sociological agency in Russia, you can see in this chart that every strengthening of Putin's approval rate is actually correlating to some kind of warfare that is happening. So I can show you here, and if you identify these years, you can see here the Chechnya, Second Chechnya War, and the rating was Putin approval rating was going up. Also, you can see here in 2008, so Georgian War, later the Ukrainian, the conflict in Ukraine and Donbass in 2014. And later on, you can see 2021, growing of rating, approval rating, just because Russia started full-scale aggression. So it is for domestic survival of Putin's authoritarian and dictatorship regime. And also, the idea behind this warfare was to prevent successful story of democratization around Russia that regime is afraid of. So what challenges to the global security actually warfare between Russia and Ukraine creates? First of all, it is war between non-nuclear and nuclear country. And we can't be sure if nuclear state, especially Russia, will not use nuclear power. So it's not the crisis, so-called, as some of the states called, regional crisis or regional war. This is exactly the global war because a nuclear power, nuclear state is a part of it. Also, this war proves the dysfunction of international rules and inability of international organization to limit the warfare, to limit or to prevent the war. And all these tragedies, humanitarian tragedies that actually happened and what we see in Kyiv Oblast, in such cities as many of you know, like Irpin, Hostomel, Bucha, in Mariupol, and probably in other cities, with massive killings, with rapes of Ukrainian women and children, are showing that international rules are unable to control this, even despite we create a number of platforms who used to do this. Also, there is a challenge and the risk of military dictatorship supremacy that could happen if Russia wins. That is why there is only one way actually Ukrainians should win in this war. Otherwise, it will persuade other authoritarian regime that the power, and especially military power, can rule the world affairs. That is definitely not true. Also, we can see the major humanitarian catastrophe with number of people who fled, and also with the number of the challenges towards financial security, health security, and food security in Ukraine and also abroad. Because I will focus mainly on these two factors and show that this, as some of the states declare regional war, is actually the challenge to the global food security. But first of all, we should mention that we have a number of Ukrainian refugees and IDPs who had to flee abroad. And it's definitely creating tensions to the number of the states that and we are thankful for them that decided to help to Ukrainian citizens. However, these are extra spendings, and if the war continues, more and more possible cases could be, and you can compare this chart, how only with the 2 months of world when I'm actually doing this lecture, the number of Ukrainians who fled is much bigger than other conflicts that are well known and that were happening in the world. Also, it is a challenge to the world security because Ukraine and also together with Russia are one of the main producers of wheat and one of the producers and exporters of barley and maize and sunflower seeds and oil to the Asian territory, to the territories of Asia and also to North Africa. And without the possibility to trade, because Black Sea is blocked, Ukraine can't have right now access to Black Sea. Russia is controlling our territories there by their ships. We can't trade. So there's a real risk of the food shortages for these mentioned countries. And one of the major points actually stated U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken during his visit in Ukraine in January 2022, that one of the Moscow long-lasting goal has been to claim that democracy is a recipe for polarization and dysfunction, that democracy can work in the modern world. And that actually creates a danger to the world community once more if autocracies and dictatorship will win. There are many reactions and they're still changing, but at least we can see three types of international reactions towards Ukrainian-Russian war, and these are slightly few of the pro-Russian countries. They are red here, and the pro-Ukrainian countries that are mainly Western countries, and such countries, ostriches, that decided to be neutral. They decided not to interfere, and the majority of them are actually African countries and Asian countries. However, once more, to my mind, the danger of the food security in many of these countries will definitely put a question that they should decide between democracy and autocracy. They should decide between order and between this aggressor who's trying to ruin this order. And finally, warfare in Ukraine, Russian-Ukrainian war is actually, beside these challenges, but it also creates a number of opportunities. Why? Because if we see that world rules and international organizations has failed to act, we can create something more. And the recent Ramstein format, so-called Ramstein format, that is the consultancy group that was formed by the United States in air base, in US air base Ramstein that is settled in Germany, is a new way have NATO-led countries together with the partners, because 43 countries that include not only NATO countries but also the Middle East countries, a few African countries, but also Asian countries, decided to join it, and first of all to provide their consultancy and provide their military support to Ukraine, but also it creates a possibility to use so-called NATO Plus formula when global institutions fail to prevent warfare. Countries that, like-minded countries, according to the NATO 2030 strategy, can act and can help under the responsibility to protect rule of the United Nations. So I'm not talking that this will change completely the global security. However, it seems that we find an instrument with this Ramstein format how the global security that fails could be at least to some extent cured. And this gives hope to Ukraine and to the world democracy. And now I want to conclude here my lecture with quoting the words once more of the Antony Blinken that he stated during his visit to Ukraine, that we should prevent that the narrow interest of some state could go ahead of the shared interest of the international community. And this is what Ukrainian security is about, and this is what Ukrainian relations and Ukrainian approach to international politics is about. Thank you for this lecture. I hope you find it interesting and necessary, and you will be more engaged into support to Ukraine and studying Ukrainian international politics and security.